A lot of people say they want to retire early, but very few build a plan that can actually make that happen. And that's a problem because retiring early, say at 55, is not the same thing as retiring at, say, 65, just a little bit earlier. It is a completely different financial problem. Different risks, different tax decisions, different pressure on your portfolio, and different life trade-offs. And if you don't understand that, you usually do one of two things. Either you retire too early without any structure, or you work way longer than you actually need to. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why that is using one simple example, and why an early retirement plan at, say, 55 may look scary, but isn't necessarily broken. So one of the most common financial goals I hear is this: I want to retire early. And I totally get it. Most people don't want to just work to the mathematically safe year because some spreadsheet told you that's the safest and most reasonable way to do this. They want time while they still have energy. They want freedom while they still have health. They want to travel more, be more present with family, maybe be around for grandkids one day, or just wake up and know that their time finally belongs to them. But where people get stuck is this: they say they want early retirement, but they never define it. They don't define when, they don't define what life actually costs, and they definitely don't define how the plan would need to work to make that goal real. So the goal stays vague, and vague goals never become real plans. So that's why I want to make this practical, because if you want to retire early, you don't just need more generic advice. You need clarity. And the easiest way to get that clarity is to understand one core truth. Retiring early is not the same as retiring at a normal retirement age. They are fundamentally different. So let's make that real with some numbers. Let's use a hypothetical couple. Mark and Lisa. Mark and Lisa, they've done a lot right. They've worked hard for decades. They've saved and invested consistently, and they've built a portfolio of $2 million with the goal of spending $120,000 a year in retirement. So not some insane lifestyle, just enough to live well, travel some, enjoy their freedom, and not constantly feel financially constrained. Now, they're asking a question a lot of people ask. Can we retire now at 55, or do we need to wait until 65? And at first glance, that may sound like a simple math problem. Same couple, same portfolio, same spending target. So it's easy to assume that the only real difference is that if they wait to 65, the money has 10 more years to grow. That is true, but that is not the biggest difference. The biggest difference is this: at age 55, their portfolio needs to survive a lot more exposed stage of life first. That's the part that most people miss. So what exactly makes 55 so different? If Mark and Lisa retire at 65, they are entering a much more traditional version of retirement. Medicare is available, Social Security may be available if they want to turn it on, and the retirement income system is starting to work more in their favor. But if they retire at 55, now they have a 10-year gap to solve for. And that 10-year gap, it changes everything. So from 55 to 65, they likely don't have Medicare, they likely don't have Social Security, and depending on how their accounts are structured, they may not want to rely heavily on retirement accounts right away. So what fills the gap? Their own money, their own planning, and their own flexibility. So that means the years from age 55 to 65 become what I call the bridge years. And the bridge years, they can put a lot more pressure on the plan than people realize. Because when people say they want to retire early, what they often mean is, I want freedom sooner. What they don't realize is that freedom sooner means more self-funding sooner. And that's why retiring at age 55 is not just retiring at age 65, but just a little bit sooner. It is a different retirement phase that needs to be funded, taxed, and managed differently. And so the easiest way to see that is to actually look at the numbers. So let's keep this simple. Mark and Lisa, they want to spend $120,000 a year. So here's one realistic way that spending might look at age 55. $45,000 for core living expenses, food, utilities, life. $30,000 for housing, maybe they still have a mortgage, property tax, maintenance. $20,000 for healthcare because they're not a Medicare yet and private health coverage can be expensive. $15,000 for travel, fun, and just lifestyle goals. And then an extra $10,000 for everything else, miscellaneous expenses, emergencies, just a buffer. So that gets us to about $120,000 a year in spending. So think about what that means at age 55. No Social Security, no Medicare, and mortgage may still exist. So a lot of that financial burden is landing directly on their own asset. So if they have a $2 million portfolio and they're covering $120,000 spent from that portfolio, that's close to a 6% withdrawal rate. And that could be the moment people panic, because you've probably heard some version of the 4% rule. So they see 6% and think, no chance, too risky, I must keep working. Now hold that thought and let's compare this to what the picture might look like at age 65. At age 65, maybe the mortgage is gone. So maybe housing costs drop from $30,000 a year to $12,000 to still cover taxes, maintenance, and upkeep. Maybe healthcare drops from $20,000 a year to $8,000 to $10,000 a year because Medicare has entered the picture. Maybe travel is still there, just a little bit lower, say 10 to 12,000 instead of the 15. And then let's say core living expenses, they stay the same. So now their spending need has dropped from somewhere around 120,000 to around 80 or 85,000. Then you layer in Social Security. Maybe that covers $35,000 to $40,000 a year combined, depending on their actual situation. Now suddenly the portfolio needs to only support $40,000 to $50,000 of spend, not $120,000. So now if the portfolio is covering around $45,000 of annual spend on a $2 million portfolio, that's closer to 2 or 2.5% of the portfolio. That is a radically different burden than the previous 6%. So this is the whole point. The person retiring early at age 55 may look stretched in the beginning, not because their entire retirement is doomed, but because that first phase of retirement is carrying way more of the weight. That is why you should not judge the entire plan by one early, maybe scary number. Now, this does not mean a high early withdrawal rate is automatically fine, but it does mean that you should think about retirement in phases and not snapshot. Now, let me be really clear here. I'm not saying a 6% withdrawal rate at age 55 is automatically safe. Sometimes the answer really is you need to work longer, spend less, or change the plan. But I am saying this, a high withdrawal rate in the early years is not automatically fatal if the pressure on the portfolio is likely to fall later. That is the nuance that people miss. Because what matters is not just the withdrawal rate in year one. What matters is the path. What changes later? Do major expenses fall? Does Medicare kick in? Does Social Security cover part of the need? Does the portfolio have enough flexibility to survive the heavier early years? That is the real conversation, and that is what separates a retirement number from a retirement plan. A number is static and a plan is dynamic. A number can scare you. A plan can show you whether that fear is actually justified. So yes, people should respect withdrawal rate, but please stop pretending one rule of thumb tells the entire story, especially when early retirement is involved. And then once you understand that, the next question becomes, where's the money actually coming from? This is where a lot of people realize they may have done a great job saving, but not necessarily a great job building flexibility. Because two different people can still have a $2 million portfolio and be in completely different shape for early retirement. Why? Because not all dollars are equally useful at every stage of retirement. Very simply, think of money in three different buckets: taxable money, tax-deferred money, and tax-free money. If Mark and Lisa have a good mix of money across those three buckets, they may have options, and options matter. Because maybe during those bridge years, it makes sense to pull from taxable assets. Maybe in lower income years, Roth conversions become attractive. Maybe healthcare subsidy planning matters. Or maybe the priority is not aggressive tax planning at all. Maybe the priority is stable, simple income with less stress. The tactic matters less than the principle. The principle is this: the more flexibility you have of where income comes from, the more control you have over your retirement. And if you want to retire early, control matters more because the system is supporting you less in those early years. This is exactly why someone can feel wealthy on paper, but still feel stuck in real life. They have money, but they do not have enough flexibility. Now, are there exceptions and strategies for accessing retirement money early? Yes, there are, but that is not the point of this video. The point is the structure of your assets determines how smooth and how successful early retirement will feel. And the same thing is true on the spending side. So another mistake that people make is treating retirement spending like one straight flat line. Same spending, same risk, same income needs, same strategy. That is not how real life works. At age 55, Mark and Lisa can very easily be in a more expensive stage of life. Higher healthcare, higher housing, maybe more travel, maybe more active spending, maybe more family support. And truthfully, those early years are often the years that matter most. Those are the healthy years, the active years, the years they still still may want to move, travel, explore, and really enjoy the freedom that they've been building for decades. Then later, the picture changes. Medicare can make healthcare more predictable, housing costs may fall, Social Security may reduce strain on the portfolio, and certain lifestyle expenses may shift. Not always down, but different, and that matters. Because retirement, it's not just one phase, it's multiple phases. There are bridge years, there are more traditional retirement years, and eventually there are later life years with a different set of realities around spending and health. A strong plan will reflect that. A weak plan, it averages it all together and pretends the details just don't matter. And once you see retirement through that lens, it exposes one of the laziest pieces of advice that people hear. From a pure math standpoint, yes, working longer usually improves the numbers. More income, more saving, fewer years pulling from the portfolio, potentially larger future benefits. That part is obvious, but that doesn't automatically make it the right life decision. And this is where I think a lot of people get advice that is technically safe, but deeply incomplete. Because the default answer can often be just work longer. And sometimes that is the right answer, but sometimes that's just half the answer. Because it only respects the money side of the equation and doesn't respect the life side of the equation. It ignores health, it ignores energy, it ignores freedom, it ignores the possibility that somebody may already have enough, just doesn't have the clarity. I would hate to see you give away 10 years of active life because someone didn't help you think through the bridge years with that clarity. Now, this does not mean forcing retirement early if the plan clearly doesn't support it. It does not mean pretending risk isn't real. It means asking the better question. Do I actually need to keep working? Or do I just feel safer continuing because no one has actually sat me down and helped me model this correctly? That is a much better planning question because money is the tool, not the mission. The mission is to use money to support a meaningful life. And on a side note that I hate to say, but I think is worth mentioning, if your current advisor tells you to keep working without modeling out options, push back. There's always a chance that their advice is in the best interest of their paycheck and not your life. So what should a real early retirement plan actually help you answer? So if early retirement matters to you, a real plan should tell you more than whether one withdrawal rate too high or too low. It should help you answer the questions that actually drive the decisions. Questions like, what do I really need to spend? Not vaguely, but realistically. How do I cover the years before Medicare and Social Security kick in? Which assets and asset locations make the most sense to draw from first? How should I think about taxes across different retirement phases? When should I focus on income stability? When should I focus on tax planning? When do Roth conversions or healthcare subsidies matter? What happens if the market struggles in the first few years of my retirement? What happens if inflation stays elevated? And maybe the biggest question of all, does this plan have enough flexibility and do you have enough control to survive real life? Or does it only work if everything goes right? That is what real planning is, not one rule of thumb, not one retirement calculator. A real plan shows you how the moving parts interact, and if it works, it should give you real confidence. And if it doesn't work yet, it tells you exactly what needs to change. Either way, you get clarity, and clarity is powerful. Because clarity is what turns early retirement from a dream into a real decision. So let's bring it home. If we go back to Mark and Lisa, here's the takeaway. Retiring at 65 is one kind of retirement. Retiring at 55 or early is another kind entirely. Same people, same portfolio, same spending goal, but very different pressure point. At 55, more of the burden falls on the portfolio early. At 55, healthcare matters more. At 55, asset location matters more. At 55, flexibility matters more. At 55, the bridge years matter more. That does not mean retiring at 55 is unrealistic. It means it should not be approached casually. It needs to be planned for differently. And I think that should be encouraging because if you're in your 40s or 50s right now, you still have time to improve the picture. You can build more flexibility. You can get clearer on spending. You can create better tax diversification, and you can stop chasing some vague idea of retirement and actually build a roadmap. That is how early retirement becomes real, not by hopes, dreams, and prayers, but by planning and taking meaningful action. If retiring early is meaningful to you, the answer isn't just automatically work until 65 because that feels safer. The answer is to understand what you really need, to understand what changes in those early years, and then to build a plan that supports the life that you actually want. If you want help thinking through your own retirement timeline, go to clawcapitalpartners.com, linked in the description below, and schedule your discovery discovery call with me. Or you can download one of our free resources so you can start getting ahead today. And if this video helped you think differently about early retirement, subscribe for more content around financial planning, retirement, and using money as a tool to support a meaningful life. See you guys in the next one.